Hello? Maybe it's just me, but I think that's a truly nice tune. What do you think? I like that song. Maybe I'll play it at the end, I'm not sure. So, to conclude our learning on rook and knight with a pawn here or there, I have a couple of nice positions to show you. This is the first one. It's a rare circumstance, but black draws here because of the stupid situation of the attacker's king. Clearly, we have b2 controlled, and b1 and a1 are surprisingly difficult to reach. I meant b1 and a2. You can't win them all. After rook e4, black plays a very good move, king c6. The point is that king a2 or king b1 both meet knight c3 check, and rook e7 is met by king d6. Rook e5, you guessed it, king d6. Rook e6 check can be met by king d5 or king d7, so long as the king can reach one of these squares to harass the rook. That is the important thing. So let's see some variations. He has to play rook c4 check. It's very simple. If check, then the point is we play king d6, and we're always in time to harass him. Note, e4 is unavailable because of knight c3 check, and so are the rest. So he just has to oscillate. And when he goes away, then we take the pawn. Very nice. So he has to check, but this doesn't do anything, because we're always on this key square to reach one of these squares to attack one of these ones. Very good. Next, white play here. Actually, we'll look at knight and pawn versus rook. Clearly, so long as there are no exceptional weird tactics, meaning the pawn can queen, this is trivial for the rook to draw. He can just sacrifice himself for the pawn. But we're actually looking at this just to see if white can win. Well, thanks to a silly position of the king and weird positioning of the knight, it is possible. The only way we can win is if the defender with the knight and pawn has really extended and gone for it with his pawn. I mean, ultimately this is just easy to draw. He can just let us take the pawn and put his knight on f7 and the king on e7. Just keep them together. It's easy draw, as we learnt before. But sometimes the pawn might be the obsession of the player, and so he just wants to storm up the board. And it's a bad sign when that happens, because as we've seen before, knight and king separated can be vulnerable. He's too far away, and we were just threatening to take the pawn. You can see here that the knight is completely trapped. Next, another example, white to play. We've seen it before. That positional factor gets your alarm bells ringing. They're separate, so let's win. Rook c6 is the move, very good. If knight h3, then that's simple. He's almost cornered. And if h5, then rook c5. And we're going to pick up the pawn, that's not the problem. We need to exploit the bad positioning of the knight. And you know that when he's going back like this, he has issues. That's a nice example. Okay, what about h6? Well, I'll just take it, and it's a similar variation to the one we just saw. Okay, knight f7 is met by this approach. We have him cornered. This king stops the defender's one from coming in, and meanwhile we control these squares. So it shouldn't be too hard. I'm sure you have lots of questions, there are many options, but you just get a feel for it, that he cannot go on. I don't want to bore you with the exact moves and the possibilities. Okay, white to play here, pause. Same again, they are distant, so there's nothing to play for. If knight f5, then rook e6, and otherwise there are of course lots of variations, but you get the drift. He's just being pushed back, and always our king shoulders the other one, so he cannot come and help. Okay, what about when the knight looks stupid? They are attached, but as we learnt before, a knight in the right corner is dangerous. There could be some checkmating tricks when the king is also on the edge. And of course it's over if there's no pawn, but what if there is one? If knight c2 check, then we win by playing like this. And it's similar position to one we saw before. We played check. He must go to c1, and now I think that's pretty simple, to be honest. Rook h6 with the threat of checkmate, forcing knight e1, and it's over. So what about a5 check? Well, now not that bad move, because then black unravels. We've seen this before. Very good setup. They're close enough to be touching. So king c3 is the move, only move. Very good. Now check, and rook a2 is important. Knight b3 doesn't do anything. He's still forced to go back because of that mating threat, and then Zugzwang. What about king b1? Well, now you've seen it before. Check, check, and what's the move here? Well done. King b3, threatening to take the knight, and also we're threatening check. Knight b1 is met by rook h2. Nothing's happening. He must lose the knight. Checkmate. Lastly, we win this. He's going down the board, and a recurring factor in this kind of position is that the pawn is not very advanced, so we don't need to worry about it. In fact, here we're pleased he has the pawn. Take it away, and then suddenly he can just oscillate. Nothing's happening then, because imagine rook b7 check could just be met by king c8, and he has the perfect setup. So we need the pawn there. So what's the move here after knight c4? Yeah, I kind of gave it away. Rook b7 check. The point, he must go to a8, and now how do we win? Rook b4. Again, pointing the finger at the knight. This is a useful strategy. Just asking, where are you going? Oh, we gain a tempo. Oh, excuse me. I've seen them do that on chess-based free training DVDs, and people pay money for that, so I'm not complaining. Okay, rook b4. The idea: king b6 is the threat. We've seen this constellation before. The king on b6 controls all these squares, and the king hasn't enough time to rush to c8. Knight e5 check. Again, attack. Attack. Knight a4, then rook a3. That wins. Just picking up the knight to a double attack. And now king b6. That is key. Here, the knight needs to control e8, but it can't anymore. Again, attack, attack, and finally, unstoppable mate. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching, and just because I feel like it, I think it's a nice song, I'm going to add Cindy Lou by Little Leon Payne. Enjoy, and good night.
Willie Bates had a daughter. Uncle John and Willie Bates feud almost every day.
Sweet Cindy Lou, sweet Cindy Lou.
No matter what old Willie says, I'm gonna marry you. Willie Bates come riding up, a shotgun in his hand. He said, I warned you, sonny boy, to stay off of my land.
Sweet Cindy Lou, sweet Cindy Lou.
No matter what old Willie says, I'm gonna marry you. He raised that old shotgun to fire the fatal shot, but Uncle John dropped Willie Bates there in the old cow lawn.
Sweet Cindy Lou, sweet Cindy Lou.
Uncle John shot Willie Bates, now I can marry you.
everybody, I'm federated chess player Peter Lach, presenting number 10 video lecture in our Chess Endgame course. I recently saw a fascinating educative example given by Grandmaster Carsten Weller, the famous German endgame specialist, and I suppose it's so useful for us as improving players or whatever strength we are, because it includes some key endgame themes. If you know these, you could win a drawn game or draw a technically drawn game or even a lost game. Okay, you need to get the most out of your position, and that's pretty much what we want to do by looking at this very instructive example. So let's see. This could seem elementary and easy for black to draw, but there's one key difference: the position of these rooks. The point is that with this white rook on the A file and this black rook on the B file, black has only two squares between him and the opposing king. This is about checking distance, which I discussed earlier, and I highly recommend that you revisit, if you haven't already done so, one of my older videos. I suppose this was number 8, in which I studied checking distance. So checking distance is essential, and the more squares, the better. And frequently, when there's only 2, then that's critically bad. So really, black draws if we switched around the positions of the rooks, and in that case, this black rook would have a grand total of 3 squares, and that would be sufficient to draw. So for that reason, white is winning. He's completely won, whether he's with the move or whether it is black to play. Of course, when I say it's completely won, that is if you know the correct method. So there are some complexities, and it makes it such a beautiful example because there are 2 key themes. Those are triangulation and Zugzwang. Excuse me. Just to give a quick definition of Zugzwang, it is a German word, and I don't know German, but essentially it means the obligation to move in chess, and when this player who is in Zugzwang is forced to play the move, then any move he plays results in a deterioration of the position or the loss of the game, essentially, because he weakens himself so much. And let's just look at this from black's perspective. So with black to play, he's lost because his king is ideally placed and so is his rook. And if he moves any of these, he weakens his position, and it gets worse, and so this endgame becomes indefensible, and I'll show you why. If the rook moves, let's say to c8, then rook a1 wins, because after, let's say, rook c7 check, note there's only 1 square between these 2 pieces, then king d8, rook b7, and e7 wins completely on the spot. I mean, after king f7, then check is sufficient, and this is just game over. So going back, that's why the rook cannot move, and if black were to play here king g8, then let me see. Then king d7 doesn't look so good, I guess, because of rook b8. I'm just trying to work this out at the board, actually. The point is that rook a1 seems strong now. Clearly, if rook c7 check, king d8, then white makes too much progress, and black just allows this pawn to queen. Yeah, okay, so rook a1. Yeah, this has to work. Since after king g7, then rook g1 check, thank you much. This rook is banished from the g file, and so it's very simple to win. It's just game over. And note, it's quite embarrassing that checking distances is very bad in this position as well. Excuse me, in this position as well. And that's just a sample variation. Maybe I should have played Rook A8 for black, but it's still completely game over. So going back, if we can conclude that nothing works for black, then with white to play, we need to get this position, but with black to play. And that's the idea of using triangulation. Very, very important theme. Very complex. So, most strong players use this in endgames. It's something it's quite hard to appreciate, but the ultimate objective is to reach this position, as you see it right now on YouTube, with black to play. So if we're playing with white, then we need to triangulate. And it's a maneuver with the king. Essentially, we want to go to d6, to d7, and then to e7, when really black would use only 3 moves to get back. Or would use only 2 moves to get back to g7. For example, to f6 and then to g7. I'll just give you an example. King d6, king f6, king d7 attacking rook, which must move... Oh, excuse me. Okay, that's a bit weird. I've just realised something. This is the position. My apologies. In this position, with white to play, king d6, king f6, king d7, excellent move, king g7, king e7, and what do you know? Have you noticed? I've just played king to e7, which means it's black to play. And then, as we've seen, a move like king g8 doesn't work, so only king g7 remains. So that's the point. White can always reach this position with black to play. Now black to play, and now king g6. And now we have to analyse this all again. Why is this losing for black? Well, now he cannot reach e8 the best way. Let's just look at this. He would have to come via f7 and via f7 to e8, whereas on g7 he had to come via just f8, and that's the point. As we see, after king g6, we're controlling f7, so he has to come via this route, which is harder. And now let's see how we can win this for white. Okay, I'm going to have to think about this. I'd say that just remembering that it's harder for black to get his king back, we should play rook a1. And now remember the bad checking distance. That's why rook b7 doesn't work, because this threatens e6 to e7. By the way, if king f6 here, then e7 still wins, I believe, since taking loses the rook. Okay, I just made a mess of that. So if that loses to that, then yeah, after rook b8, king d7, king d7, check, king d6, now check now here. I think this is the difference, because after rook e6, king d8, we once again see that resource, tactical resource. Check, pick up the rook. So going back, after king d8, black has trouble stopping this pawn. And now I believe that this is kind of Lucena position, and I'll just show you. If rook b6, then king f8. Okay, that was a bit confusing. Hopefully my analyses were correct then. I'm just doing this from my own experience. So king g6, we play now rook a1. And that's why it's winning, I guess, because note the difference. If this rook were on the a file, then he would have 3 squares of checking distance, and we couldn't do this nice attack, as we can see here, after rook b8 check, king d7, rook b7, king d6, rook b6, king c7. It wouldn't work there, because if this rook were on the a file, then you see it's still check, and after a king coming to b8 or so, then this rook can take the pawn. Okay, I'll leave it there.